On Christmas Eve, each family member had their allotted time to arrive. Junior members of the family arrived first, and the senior members later.
And then they made the big trip to Sandringham, and arriving in 3 cars, I think. So there'd be Charles and Diana and the boys in one, and then there'd be a follow-up car behind, and then there'd be the Range Rover with all the presents. Because, they might be very small, the presents, but there were a lot of them. And then they would, everything, they walked out and the Queen would be at the door to greet them, and then everything would be unpacked by staff and all the presents would be put in the right place. And then they would go into tea. And, they'd have a big tea, and then the present opening ceremony would begin. So there wasn't, the fact that Charles and Diana weren't really speaking didn't really matter because so much else was going on. So everybody would arrive at whatever destination. Now, Royal Christmases started at Windsor, and that was all the royal families to come there, to each be given their own sort of area. And then, of course, the Christmases moved back to Sandringham, and it was much, much smaller. But Diana's first Christmas at Windsor, she hated it. She bought really lovely presents. She bought people cashmere sweaters and beautiful fragrances, and sort of, she was trying really hard, and they sort of looked at her and thought, what a waste of money. And they literally give things like, it always sticks in my mind that Princess Anne once gave Prince Charles a doormat, because that's what she wanted. So their presents were very, very small and very practical, and Diana had got all these fairly extravagant sort of, as I said, cashmere wraps, cashmere cardigans, cashmere sweaters, and they sort of weren't very grateful. And they have a lot of in-jokes, and a lot of the jokes are quite sort of childlike, and Diana couldn't get her head around that. Present giving is on Christmas Eve, and all the presents are put on trestle tables with a huge Christmas tree, and the little kids' presents are under the tree, and the grown-ups' presents are on trestle tables covered in linen cloths, and they're done in order of precedence. So if you start off with the Queen, and then you go right, and then Prince Charles, and you go down, and it's got sort of labels, and then everybody leaves their presents out so people can look at them. I mean, it's quite bizarre for us, really.
They generally buy each other inexpensive and amusing gifts, often creating hilarity and laughter on what may otherwise be quite a stuffy occasion.
But it worked for them, and then they would go upstairs and change for supper and have a beautiful Christmas Eve supper.
Every year, they all attend a black tie dinner on Christmas Eve, and after the inevitable drinks, they settle down for a hearty seasonal meal. That Christmas Eve of 1991 was not a harmonious and laughter-filled occasion, as the atmosphere between Diana and Charles could not have been more frosty. They barely spoke unless they really had to, and humour was not in abundance, except when Diana focused her attention on her beloved sons, William and Harry. They were quick to snap at one another and avoided interacting as much as possible. As is usual on these formal occasions, once the meal is complete, the men are offered liqueurs and the women retire to another room for their own discourse, which must have been a relief for Diana. It is said that nobody goes to bed until the Queen has retired for the evening, and she often stays up until after midnight at Christmas. Diana felt isolated in all their traditions and rituals, even after years of learning what the family does. She felt claustrophobic and trapped in their royal routine. Every year on Christmas Day, the Queen and all her family gather for a church service at St. Mary Magdalene on the Sandringham estate. Well-wishers come and watch as the royal family enter the church. After the service, the royals stop and talk to the waiting crowds and wish them a Merry Christmas.
All wrapped up. Yeah, break on.
Diana found her only confidant to be Sarah Ferguson, known as Fergie. The two girls had known each other for a long time. In fact, they became friends as teenagers before they married their respective partners and became sisters-in-law. Diana paved the path for Sarah to meet Andrew. They became close, often seen to be laughing and joking with each other. Fergie was known to bring out Diana's cheeky side.
Fergie and Andrew were there, which was great for Diana, because at the time she and Fergie had hatched this plot to leave the royal family at the same time, which was, a crazy idea, but it gave them, something to sort of focus on, because they were both very, very unhappy. And they took their children, so Beatrice and Harry and William, they used to take them out to a nearby hotel. They could go swimming, they could get out of the house, because I think Sandringham isn't nearly as big as it looks. So it's all quite cramped and you're slightly on top of each other. So they were desperate to get out. And the only other alternative was to sort of sit in your room and pretend to read or something, which is, Diana did a lot of that Christmas. The atmosphere, apparently you could have cut it with a knife, that old cliche. It was really bad, and everyone was trying to sort of make sure that Charles and Diana weren't left alone together, because they could, when a couple is not speaking, it pervades the atmosphere for everybody else. I really don't think the boys picked up on it, because they were so excited, so excitable. They both had new bikes for Christmas, and they spent a lot of time just zooming around the Sandringham estate on their bicycles. And they had a nanny there. They would have had their protection officers there. So there was really no reason, and I sincerely don't believe they did pick up on it. A lot of people think that they were subjected to a lot of the marital rows between their parents, but when you're quite young, it's not nearly so noticeable. I mean, William did notice it later, but that particular Christmas, no, they didn't notice it. As far as my research has taken me, they were really happy and having a good time. And I think they also had Peter and Zara there, who they absolutely love. So that's Princess Anne's children.
Tensions were running high. The Christmas celebrations with the Windsor family were drawing to a close, and Diana was struggling to keep a brave face.
It's not just the Christmas and Christmas Day. It was a good stretch of 5 or 6 or 7 days. I think it might have even been 10 days. So it would go from Christmas and all the shooting, because Sandringham is a shooting estate. So as soon as Boxing Day came, there'd be a huge shoot, and then there'd be another shoot a few days later.
Generations of the royal family have had a passion for hunting, and for many years it has been a great royal tradition for the family to have a Boxing Day shoot at Sandringham, followed by luncheon out on the estate.
It gave the Queen and Prince Philip and Charles and Andrew and Edward a chance to invite a few friends and go shooting. So it revolved around the sport. So for the women in the party, unless they went out shooting too, it was pretty tedious.
This Christmas, the boys, Wills and Harry, were allowed to accompany the shoot, alongside Princess Anne's children, Peter and Zara. Diana, however, spent much of her time alone in her room in tears, while the boys were off playing with the other children. It is said that during this time, her mental health was quickly deteriorating, and she was struggling to find a space for herself in the Windsor household. On this particular Christmas, Diana found Fergie in the same position as herself. They were both very unhappy in their marriages and spent much time in their rooms together, talking about how they might find a way out of the royal family.
Diana and Fergie were very close. There was a little bit of jealousy on Diana's part, because she felt that Fergie breezed into the royal family and everyone loved her, and they looked at her Diana, and thought she was dull, and that Fergie was this load of fun and noisy and lovable, and which she was. But Fergie was very unhappy too. Diana and Fergie had this great relationship, and they used to do crazy things together. They got out the Queen Mother's Bentley from the garage, put on a chauffeur's hat, and sort of did wheelies all round the drive with the car. No one found out. So they used to do these crazy things, and I think it just lightened the atmosphere for them.
The Queen stays at Sandringham until after the 6th of February, the anniversary of her father's death, and she keeps up all the festive decorations until her departure. Diana, however, was keen to get away as quickly as possible, back to the relative normality of life and away from the watching eyes of the royals. But she dutifully stayed until the 10th of January and then headed off to Highgrove with Charles, although further conflict was quickly in evidence over the boys being allowed to watch TV during the day. Charles and Diana's life together was one argument after another. It was tense and uncomfortable. They swiftly went back to barely communicating. "1991 was the last Christmas Charles and Diana were together in the eyes of the public, though she would still return to Sandringham to spend time with her boys in the following years. As they welcomed in the new year 1992, the family was hopeful for a more pleasant year. But as it turned out, it would be the Queen's annus horribilis. After all the festivities were over, Charles and Diana went on their tour to India.
Diana was, by this time, she was an absolute wizard at the photo opportunity and making herself either, she could look anything. And the photographers wanted her to sit in front of the Taj Mahal. And she realized that this Taj Mahal was built as a symbol of love. And there she was, all on her own. And she posed beautifully with her legs folded, and she looked very wistful, and she'd never looked more lonely. She was there in front of the symbol of love all on her own, so it sent out a message to the world: I am all on my own.
When asked about the experience, Diana said it had been very healing. When asked why, she said, "Work it out for yourself."